Hey, this is Andrew, and I'm here to bring you another Keyforge deck review. This one I went ahead and traded my daughter for because I thought it would be a good one to bring to an event that I was going to today. She wasn't interested in going, and it happened to be reversal. And I said, um, "Hey, this deck seems bad." She had actually opened another deck previously that I had brought to a reversal event and did pretty well with. Didn't win it, but this one, I was going through. I have all of our family's decks in several different tools, and I was going through on decksofkeyforge.com, going through my decks sorted by SAS, and this is not the lowest, but it was the second lowest. And I looked through it and I said, this is a real stinker, and obviously those metrics aren't everything, and some of the things. Well, there were a couple things in particular about that other deck I tried for reversal that ended up coming back to bite me. Specifically, having an Arise in a deck with two Schulers, and so I thought, I think this one doesn't even have something like that to worry about. So let me go for it. So I asked her, and since she had a couple stinkers, I thought, hey, I'll give her one of my good decks in exchange for this if she'll let me. So I offered. I said, hey, sweetie, will you trade this to me? I want it because it's bad. She laughed and said, sure. So it's mine now. And I took it to this event today. There were 8 of us total in the event. Nice round number for running Swiss, and I came out on top. So that was what. Well, I guess my deck came out on bottom, something like that. Um, and yeah, so I guess I wanted to first of all just highlight how I went about doing this. I think going through, or how I went about finding this deck and choosing it, and I think having the rating systems, they're a good starting place, and then for figuring out, okay, this is a low end deck, and then the number one thing, okay, I guess the number one thing I was looking for is, does this have any like burst steal abilities? I want to stay away from those. If you're not familiar with the reversal format, the whole shtick is you show up, you hand your opponent a deck, they hand you theirs, you play with the deck the other person brought. So your goal is to bring a really terrible deck. And I thought, hey, if this has any sort of, if this has any reliable amber control, that's probably a bad thing. So I didn't want that. And then generally speaking, I looked for what do these houses want to do, and can they not do it well? And you'll see some great examples of that in here. We have the houses. We'll see what they want to do, and they're just not able to pull it off. Oh, and then one other just logistical note before we jump in, or I guess two things. One, at the end, I'll also go through a couple of just fun things that I saw in other people's decks that worked out in interesting ways, and I thought were kind of funny. And then, and these are like funny things that just can only happen at a reversal event. And then, yeah, you'll notice I'm not using the video camera for this, and my Logitech, what is it, it's their I think C922X. It's their kind of mass market one. It just stopped working for me the other day, so that's why I'm not using it, and I put in a ticket with them to get it sorted out because it's less than a year old. Hopefully I can get that resolved, but that is why I am not bringing you video today, or of me, or of physical cards. But I managed to get this set up so we can kind of scroll through these two at a time on Decks of Keyforge, and I think that works out pretty well. Yeah, okay, so let's get into it. All right, so the first two cards. So I should say this is Brobnar, Mars, and Shadows, and they're all houses I like. I mean, I enjoy all of them. In Brobnar, I'm excited if I see a couple of angers. I'm thinking, okay, this is good. I have 2 angers. That's great. Champions Challenge. I had an opponent look at this and go, oh, this is a great card. I'm so excited about this. Especially if you're behind on board state, it is a good card. It's interesting. My experiences at these reversal events, people tend to not get really far ahead on board state because everybody tried to bring a terrible deck. So there's just not a lot of ability to get lots of stuff on the board. So yeah, so Champions Challenge less valuable in that situation. A couple copies of Coward's End. Destroy each undamaged creature and gain 3 chains. Again, good if you're really worried about board state. When you're already going slow, I think those chains really are a bit rough. So usually I don't think this is quite worth it, especially in the reversal format. It just ends up being kind of a bum play. But 2 copies there. And then Smith, gain an amber, and then gain 2 more if you control more creatures than your opponent. But hey, we're 6 cards in and we haven't seen creatures yet. That's concerning. Okay, but we have Smith. Alright, 2 more actions. We have Tremor. We have Warsong. Warsong could work out pretty good with the Angers. Tremor is a good card. I like it. But now we're 8 cards in. Haven't seen a creature. And then now we'll see our first creature. But first we have a cannon artifact that exhausts to do 2 damage to a creature. And then we have our first creature, which is Valder, and then I'll skip to the last 2 because one of them is another Valder, and then Smash. So this Brobnar setup, first of all, like the Angers and Warsong can be okay if you have your other creatures on the board. There's definitely potential there, but with only 3 Brobnar creatures, the chances that those fizzle, that those have nothing to get ready and fight, is pretty high. There's a definite chance that will happen. I've played this deck online trying to win and had a situation where I didn't even have any creatures, but I used Champions Challenge just to get them down to 1 creature. Yeah, it can be pretty rough. Smith, not so good if you don't have creatures. So yeah, just a lot of fizzling there. Just a second, let me check on my dog here. All right. So yeah, just not a lot of great stuff there in the Brobnar. Let's move on to Mars. So we have Ammonia Clouds, deal 3 damage to each creature. Can be okay. Good for clearing the board, especially I feel like in reversal there tends to be fewer really big daunting creatures. So okay, probably gonna get some value out of that. And then Psychic Network. So if we have some ready Mars creatures on the board, we can get some steel in. That could turn out good. Okay, we have soft landings, 2 soft landings, so those might work well with the Psychic Network. Could be decent. Okay, we have a Mother Gun and a Sniffer. Mother Gun can deal some damage. Sniffer doesn't do a lot. You exhaust it and Elusive goes away. So we're 6 cards in. The next 6 are creatures, and they're 3 2-ofs. So here's the thing. With Soft Landing, what we're hoping for at this point is some high value creatures that like can come in and get something, do something spectacular right away. Or we're maybe hoping to get like a handful, like 2 of these, couple Mars creatures and the Psychic Network, that would be really cool. It's a lot to bank on. If you could get that, it'd be great. All right, so we get Tonks, which are good. These are good for fighting, but they don't have really any other spectacular effect. Next up, we have a couple of Azyma Think Drones. These are really disappointing creatures. They're 3 power, they reap, and you can archive a friendly creature or artifact from play. I think the best, interesting play that I saw somebody do with these was they would reap with the Think Drone and put the Sniffer back in their archives, because that way then the next time they play Mars, they can just play it again for that Amber, because the effect doesn't really matter. So then it kind of turns it into a slow 2 Amber reap, but it's just not that good. Then we have Zizix the Many, which is 3 power, and when you fight or reap, you can reveal a creature from your hand. If you do, you archive it, and Zizix gets 3+1 counters. This has potential for, opening up your hand. It's vulnerable to easy wiping early on. The last matchup, which I came really close to losing, my opponent had 2 of these on the board and got one kind of big and stored up a bunch of creatures for kind of a power Shadows turn. So definitely some scary stuff that can happen there, but nothing. There's not like a Zookeeper or what's the one that does the Exilibolter where you can purge something. Just nothing that fancy. And again, if you have them out, then the Psychic Network can work pretty well. But the Tunks are kind of big, but everything else is small. So your chances of keeping that going are pretty small, and having a lot of these to target with the Psychic Network. So it just doesn't quite click. Okay, let's go into Shadows. Oh, and you can see too, if you can anger the Tunks on a Brobnar turn, that can be kind of good, but the rest just not that, not that exciting. And we're up to, 9 creatures total in the deck so far? Alright, let's go on to Shadows. We have Booby Trap, which gains you an Amber, and you deal 4 damage to a creature that's not on a flank with 2 splash. That is pretty powerful if you can land it. I mean, that's a total of 8 damage. Pretty powerful if you can land it. The problem is, if your opponent only has 2 creatures on the board, you can't land it. You're just gonna get that Amber. Or even worse, if your opponent has 2 or fewer creatures and you have at least 3 creatures, then you have to hit your own. So, a bit hard to use this, but there is that case where you probably get an Amber. Again, in reversal, you're probably not going to be playing that many creatures, right? It's pretty typical for low creature counts, which just means this probably isn't going to hit much. Then we have a Key of Darkness, which is just comical. This is potentially good in a couple situations. One is if you really just are stealing a lot of Amber from your opponent, and you're going to be able to knock them down to 0, and this lets you forge in the middle of your turn for 2 extra, which is almost the same as Key Charge. It's only 1 worse. If your opponent has Amber, it's probably not worth it to pay that extra 6. Although if you're in a bait and switch battle or something, where you're trading a lot of Amber back and forth, maybe it is worth it to do it, but probably not. And again, in this format, there's just not that much passing Amber back and forth. There's some, but just not that much. Pawn Sacrifice, that's a solid card. You gain an Amber, sacrifice a friendly creature, and then you deal 3 damage each to 2 creatures. And yeah, this is solid. This can do good work. We have Poison Wave, which gains you an Amber and deals 2 damage to each creature. That also can be pretty good. You'll see this has a little bit of a tendency to hit its own, but it's okay. Then we have Relentless Whispers, which gains you an amber. You deal 2 damage to a creature, and if if this damage destroys the creature, you steal 1. Um, very good if you can pull it off. There's a good chance with Poison Wave that you're going to be able to pull it off, or Pawn Sacrifice. So this is probably like the card I'm most sad about having in this deck, given that I want to use it for reversal events. There's that potential for a steal and a 3 credit swing, or a 3 amber swing, along with killing one of my creatures, which is a pretty strong effect. Subtle Maul. Subtle Maul's interesting. I still not sure about the math about whether it's good to proc this or not. But yeah, using it to make your opponent discard a random card from their hand is I mean, that's all you can do, but it's okay. Next up, we're finally into the Shadows creatures here. I guess, yeah. So we're gonna have like 6 of them, or 5, I think, rather, because it's an upgrade at the end. So the first one is Carlo Phantom, who's 1 power, elusive, and skirmish, and each time you play an artifact, you steal 1. Okay, so that could be good, and we have the Subtle Maul. We have Mother Gun and Sniffer, and we have Cannon. So there are 4 artifacts here, 4 potential times where you could steal 1 with the Carlo. That I'm also a little bit sad about, although the fact that only 1 of them is in Shadows means that your opponent has a good chance to be able to kill this. And, you know, without any taunt, and I'll tell you right now, there's no Shadow Self, he's pretty easy to get rid of. Next up, we have Nexus, 3 power, elusive, and when you repeat, use an opponent's artifact as if it were yours. This started causing me trouble in one of my games. This can be really annoying, a really annoying card, but again, not super high power and not a lot of support to keep him on the board. Naughty, similarly annoying if he gets out, but pretty easy to kill with you know, any sort of direct damage effects. He's elusive, 2 power, and he exhausts to steal 1. And then we have Dodger, who fights and steals 1, is 5 power. And, you know, Dodger is good, but again, could really benefit from some support like Shadow Self. So there's some steal in here. I'm sad about that, but there's not the big swing steals. And without Speed Sigil, these just aren't very reliable. I was playing in I think it was my first matchup. I pitched a Speed Sigil because I just felt like, you know, I definitely didn't want these to be able to come out ready. I think that was the right call. But because this doesn't have Speed Sigil, you know, the opponent, which in this case will be me, would really have to play a Speed Sigil to give this a lot of momentum. Then we have Umbra, 2 power, skirmish, and fight, steal 1. Again, annoying, but fairly easy to kill off before he can do anything. And then, lastly, we have not even Duskrunner, but Silent Dagger. It's an upgrade, it gives you an amber, and the creature you put it on gains reap, deal 4 damage to a flank creature. So, again, like, there's some steal in here, but there's not a ton. There's not a lot of internal synergy in the Shadows. There's not a lot of internal synergy in Mars. There's just not a lot of like Mars power turns coming down the pike. And same with Brobnar. There's just not that internal synergy. There's really not much cross house synergy. I guess, you know, with the Carlo and artifacts, maybe there could be a little bit. With the Angers, maybe there could be a little bit, but it just doesn't add up to much. So yeah, this deck often left my opponents in situations where they're saying, "Oh, I guess I'll play the Smith. I don't get the extra 2. Oh, okay, I'll discard Coward's End. I play Anger and I just get the Amber, and there's nothing else I can do with it. I'll discard War Song." I guess I'll discard Psychic Network, or I play Psychic Network and I steal one. I had an opponent discard a Soft Landing because there's just no point to it. Discarding Key of Darkness, waiting a turn to play Booby Trap so they could actually do something with it. Just a lot of kind of fizzle turns, and that is what you want in a reversal deck. You want something that just doesn't give your opponent opportunities to do interesting things and start to claw back any control over the game. So yeah, it was fun playing against this today. It really did turn out to be pretty bad, and it was great. So just some other quick thoughts about the event. Had a good time with everybody, and yeah, just I really appreciate the community and the other people that are coming out to play this game. There were a couple of just fun situations that came up. One, in the first matchup that I played, I wound up getting 3 Gauntlet of Command on the table, and he had actually the same houses as me, and it was interesting because I think he just didn't have a lot of Mars creatures, so there was that. And so I think the gauntlets in a normal game weren't amounting to much, but there were a couple times where I was able to drop a Brobnar creature and then use a couple of gauntlets to reap twice, and because he had no creatures on the board. So I feel like that ended up being where it wouldn't have been that good against a normal deck. It was actually quite good against a reversal deck because, well, as you can see, this deck just isn't filling up the board with creatures. It has a total of 14 of them, so it's just, and a lot of them are small. So so it was very feasible for me to be able to drop a creature on the board and reap with it a couple times using the gauntlets. The last game I played, my opponent's deck had 2 copies of Too Much to Protect. No bait and switch, but 2 copies of Too Much to Protect. And that is a card that is surprisingly bad. Well, I mean, it's, I guess, predictably bad, but usually I'm really excited to see that card because it means my opponent could have a great turn, and it turns out to my benefit. And in this format, unfortunately, people just aren't generating that much amber. They're not printing that much, and so your opportunities to use Too Much to Protect to actually gain a bunch, to actually steal a bunch, are really few and far between. And that game, it did end up helping me win the game, and I wouldn't have been able to do it without that card. So that, it worked out, but the first time through my deck, I was able to just play it for the amber, and that was all it was good for. But the last time through, when we were going for our third keys, my opponent got up to, I believe, 8, and I was able to use the Too Much to Protect to drop them down to 6, play Carlo Phantom, and then use Relentless Whispers on the Carlo Phantom to get that last steal to drop them down to 5. And at that point, I'd pushed up to 8, and they were not able to stop me, which felt really good. So it was a clutch application of that Too Much to Protect play, but really I got kind of lucky because I had 5 Shadows cards in my hand, but I had drawn the only, I needed those 2 cards because they didn't have any creatures on the board. I didn't have creatures on the board, and if I hadn't had the Carlo and the Relentless Whispers, then the Too Much to Protect would have just fizzled and not helped me. And there was a previous turn there where I ended up, their deck had 2 Gromids, which is just mind-bogglingly terrible. And I had a turn where I used Battlefleet with 1 Grommet in my hand, and happened to just pretty luckily draw into a copy of Sample Collection, and got to archive 2 of their creatures, which also really helped me out. So, couple lucky draws there, and just weird situations. But it was fun seeing, too much to protect, and just how generally bad it is in this format because your opponents aren't printing a ton of amber, and the not very many creatures triple Gauntlet of Command, and how good it was just because it didn't actually have to deal with a lot of board state on the opponent's side. So it was a lot of fun, and I love doing that kind of event. It's such a different flavor on the game, and everybody's in a really silly mood because we all intentionally brought our worst decks, and yeah, it was just great fun. So I enjoyed it. I hope you enjoyed this video and that you will keep forging keys. And oh, you know what? Sorry, one last thing. I just want to give an honorable mention shout out to my brother-in-law Mark, who jumped on to play a game with me last night to test out the deck, and he actually managed to win against me with this deck, and I was playing with his worst deck. So he has an even worse deck than this that maybe I can get him to bring on sometime. But anyway, that's a wrap. Thanks, and keep forging.